Hi everyone, and welcome to the Ananda Rose channel. You're here with me, Kirsty Denny. I'm your host for this Neurodiversity Controversy segment. And today I'm here with Sally Prebble. And Sally has a really interesting background in clinical psychology and neuropsychology. So lots of professional expertise and, of course, perhaps most relevant of all, her experience as a mother that she brings to her work. And so she has a couple of things, lots of things going on. She has a business called Peace Talks, along with Yorinda Rapsy. And I've been following their work a bit and just loving seeing how they're approaching it and bringing in the principles of nonviolent communication, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit as we go. And she also has a YouTube channel, which I'm really loving, called Connected Parenting, and which is also really cool. And so we're just going to chat a little bit about parenting, communication, Sally's work, and of course, we're going to bring in the topic of neurodiversity. So welcome, Sally. It's so nice to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. And I love what you do in these interviews. I've watched a few of them and I really enjoy the gentle conversations you have. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And so just as a little bit of a background, how I know of Sally is that I first met her through a homeschooling / unschooling group when my children were really small. And so at that point, I actually was at the stage where I was kind of just chasing a toddler and a baby. So I didn't actually get to interact with Sally that much, but from what I saw of
we were
her,
probably chasing each other around the sandpit or something.
yeah, but from what I saw of her, her vibe was always so warm and inviting, and I could tell that I really resonated with her approach to parenting. And so then she's moved away. She's not in Auckland anymore, but I've been following her work as I've seen it pop up online with interest. And yeah, and so we'll get to parenting, because I think in some ways we had probably a similar experience of new parenthood where I'm referencing your website. You felt really well prepared, and I also thought that I was prepared. I'd done my research. I was like, yep,
yeah,
I know how I'm going to approach this, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be peaceful. It's going to be all attachment parenting. And then on your website, you refer to, having high hopes and then feeling exhausted and alone or isolated. And I think this is such a common experience. So I will loop back to this, but I am just curious kind of how you got into the study or the interest in psychology to begin with, pre-kids in the old days.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. So there's a few steps. So thank you for breaking it into manageable chunks for me. Yeah, so I guess the first bit, the jump to psychology, that was kind of pre-kids. I'd actually started off with a background in philosophy and political studies, and I'd been a policy analyst, so sort of working on big social issues. And my heart was always drawn to come back to people and understanding like individual motivation, like why do people do the things they do, and how can we understand how people work so that we can try to tackle some of the big problems we're facing, because it always struck me that having these big sort of policy solutions was missing an understanding of why people behave the way they do. So I was really interested in that. So I went back to study again and studied psychology for quite a few years and clinical psychology, and got my PhD in that actually while I had my babies, which was maybe partly why it was a hard start. It was like there was a lot going on. Yeah, so I really was just really excited studying psychology and learned so much from it. But yeah, and we can kind of get into the but part of that, because there is a little bit of a but there as well. But that was where I was when I first started having my children, right in the midst of learning all about brains and behavior and how and why we do the things we do. And I did feel pretty prepared. I really, I'd done a lot of work on myself, and I really had quite a clear sense of what I wanted to do. But it was also confusing. There's a lot of voices and a lot of messages when you're a young parent, and a lot of conflicting messages. You get one answer from Plunkett, and you get one answer from the doctor, and you get another answer from your mother-in-law. And I had another set of answers that came from my psychology training, and that was interesting because sometimes that conflicted with my instincts. And so that was a big learning for me, was around that. Like, how do you filter all these messages and stay true to your instincts as a parent, and connect with your values? So yeah, that's quite a whistle stop of how I got to that point.
Yeah, yes. And I didn't study psychology, but it sounds so familiar from the point of view of like, yes, there's so much information. And I did a lot of reading about, attachment theory, and, you kind of, when you start examining how you're going to parent, you automatically then, look at your own childhood. And then that's a whole nother thing to unpack. Yeah, but I mean, I kind of looked at it and like you, I was like, okay, I feel really firm in how I want to approach parenting. And to a certain degree, I've stuck with that, but that did not stop it from being so much harder than I anticipated. And also that real thing of, this is my theory of how I think it should go, and how do I combine that with my intuition, my gut feeling about what's right. And so talk me through a little bit your early days of parenthood, and as you're comfortable.
Well, no, I've been pretty open about it. It was challenging, and I think there was a lot going on for me. There was the experience of being in coffee groups where all of the other babies, this was my interpretation, all of the other babies were sleeping like little angels, and my baby wouldn't sleep, and I didn't know how to help my baby sleep. And later, I learned and I understood that experience as there was undiagnosed autism, that it was a really challenging time for my poor baby. She was really experiencing a lot in her body that I didn't know about. But at the time, I didn't know all of that. So it was a year of sleeplessness and of having a lot of advice and a lot of even criticism at times of that must have been my fault. I must have been doing something wrong that my baby wouldn't sleep. So, and not just sleep, was crying a lot. So it's incredibly exhausting, I think, for a lot of us when we reach parenthood and our children aren't doing what everyone tells us they should be doing, and the things that we thought would help don't shift anything really quickly, and it's quite isolating. It's a very isolating time. There isn't the village of support that we used to have, that we were evolved for. And yeah, so I think I like the way you kind of named it before, that there's a lot of layers of what's going on. There's our inner values of what we would really like this experience to look like. There's what's happening inside our child that we may not fully understand. And then there's the layer of community support, which may not be there. And, and I was one of the lucky ones. I still do have parents around. I did have some people, but it's not the level of support that that our nervous systems were evolved to have at that time. So yeah, it's a challenging time. And it's also like that really inspired me, though. There was something about it. I could kind of just see it from afar going, yeah, I don't think this is how it's supposed to be. I'm really interested in what's going on for parents. And at that time, I was teaching parenting courses for the Ministry of Education at that time, and it was their kind of prescribed courses that I was teaching. And so I was in touch with so many other parents who were also struggling, and it was just kind of interesting to me, like just noticing this, like, wow, there's a lot of people who are struggling, and we don't always talk about it. Like, it's not kind of popular to talk about how hard it is to parent it. You know, we want to put the pictures of our smiling children on Facebook and, you know, go to the party with everyone looking well dressed and go to the beach and it's a beautiful, perfect picnic day. This is the kind of image that if we're good parents, if our children are good children, you know, good children, good parents, that this is what it will look like. And if it doesn't look that way, it's quite scary, and it's hard to know how to talk about that, I think.
Yeah, so interesting that you started to notice those common threads with other parents, because of course there's a range of experiences and you can have a more or less challenging experience. And I also had the baby who didn't sleep and always cried. And so that's a really intense introduction to parenthood, but there's so many different ways of experiencing. I often talk about this idea of expectations versus reality, you know, and there's lots of different versions of that. You know, like some parents might expect that their life will continue more or less as before, or they're expecting their baby to act a certain way. And then my version of that was an expectation that I could be the perfect attachment parent. and then my baby had trouble breastfeeding and I couldn't serve him, and I had these beautiful organic baby slings and he hated them. You know, so all these different versions of like well, how I envisioned it would be, and then the reality. And I think there's lots of different flavors of that parents go through. And I saw that you're advertising grief circles for parents, and I so loved that, because what I experienced actually was really intense grief. I had this baby who was growing and developing and was like more or less fine, and I was totally grief stricken. And a lot of it was like what I chose as the thing to fixate on, I will say, was the breastfeeding. Like, I was devastated that that wasn't working out. But that's just one layer of it, you know, like that feeling of, I would say, inadequacy was like bringing up all my other layers of, oh, how can I be perfect? How am I not perfect? How can I fix this? And so I'm guessing this is something that you work with a lot.
It
in
is.
different guises with families.
Yeah. And I like the way you put that gap between the expectation and our experience, and that's the gap where grief lives, that gap. Yeah, and I imagine in that circumstance, like, it sounds like there was this longing to be able to care for your baby in a particular way, and to have this particular kind of closeness, and to be able to provide this nurturance, and the sadness and grief when it doesn't pan out that way can be really intense. Yeah. And what I've noticed in the work I do with parents is so often there's grief beneath the struggle, that that day to day there's this ongoing just kind of shadow of pain that follows, and they may not think of it as grief. It may be, you know, grumpiness, or tightness, tiredness, exhaustion, or just having trouble being really present with their children. But very often there is this layer of grief around that gap in expectation, or around the judgments that you talk about, the huge judgments that we have of ourselves, that we're not good enough parents, that we're that we're not the exact perfect attachment parent that we thought we'd be, or that we weren't able to breastfeed, or that we weren't that we wanted to work and that we also think that we should be at home all the time, or vice versa. Yeah, a lot of pain from those self-judgments. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it can be so intense and so unheard, because as you say, if a lot of the time, if we're not even recognizing that it's there and giving it a name, or if we're trying to express it and it's not being met with compassion or understanding, that can be really hard. And so
Yeah, and I think even sometimes people are trying really hard to hear us. Like, we might have friends or people around who, they're really trying to listen, but the way we're trained to listen as a society tends to be offering advice or reassurance, or trying to comfort people. So with all of these ways, they come with intentions of care, but they have a tendency to shut us down. And grief and these big emotions really want to be heard fully. They want to be expressed fully. So trying to find ways to really hear each other and give space for the pain and the grief, I think, is so important, especially for parents. When we're just, as soon as we start speaking and we're told that we should be grateful, or that our child is really healthy, so things could be so much worse for you, or Kirsty, you just need to just cheer up, it's not that bad, it's really
yes,
not that
yes.
bad. Or
Yeah.
have you tried this, have you tried that, have you read this book? This advice comes. All of it well-intentioned, so it's not that people are trying to be mean and not hear
Of
us,
course.
but
Yeah.
so often it is really hard to find space to be heard as a parent. And remembering that at this time you were probably running around the sandpit, so it's hard to actually even sit down and be heard and have that space carved out for yourself.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many competing demands that I think probably a lot of parents, or especially mothers, would feel selfish to even think about. Oh, I need to go and see someone and talk to someone and to process this.
Yeah.
But it's such a valuable thing to do. And I was just talking to someone recently about my early parenting journey, and I was like in survival mode, because with a high needs baby you kind of are, but I was also very stuck emotionally, and the balm for that, what would have made me able to move through it much more quickly and with more grace, would have been to see someone and to have that grief like just deeply allowed, and to let myself fully go through it. And I kind of even knew that at the time, but I was just like, okay, the day-to-day things keep going. I've just got to get through the next day and the next day and the next day.
Incredibly challenging to find the space and time for it, and the energy for it. And I just want to pick up on that point, that as we come into parenthood, there can be this kind of emotional stuckness that comes in, that almost freeze or fight flight thing can come in, because everything is so overwhelming and it's touching into our own childhood stuff at the same time, in a way that I think it's so hard to prepare yourself for. Like, you may have heard this, that that things will come up when you have children, your own childhood stuff will come up. But it really does. It really, our children are the most incredible teachers, and they open us in ways that it's hard, it can be quite hard to manage in the day-to-day flow. And a lot of that can be around having this idea of how we really want to parent our children, that may be different from what our parents did, or may have a particular flavor to it, and then we find ourselves reverting to these old ways of doing things, not because we're not trying hard enough, but because when we're in a really overwhelmed state, we just go into habit mode. We just will go into these old patterns. Yeah, and then there's the pain around that. So there's so much, there's so much to do while you're a parent. There's so many layers of work to be doing. And yeah, I do think it can be such an act, not only of self-love to seek support if you possibly can, but also love for your children, because it really, finding space and care for yourself is such an ultimate act of care for your children. It's really giving that kind of solid base where you can have enough solidity to care for your children.
Yeah, definitely. It is incredible, all the learning experiences that are available through parenting when we're open to them. And it's pretty hard work. And yeah, it is. It's such a powerful thing to seek assistance with it and, heal the whole family, really. And so, of this segment, obviously, we talk a little bit about neurodiversity, and this topic is for everyone. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your experiences with learning about neurodiversity, how it comes into play, how it maybe kind of brings another element of sensitivity or intensity in some ways.
Yeah, so I have two of my three children are neurodiverse. So I have a daughter who's autistic and a son with ADHD. So so that's kind of just the sort of background of my experiences there. I think what I noticed coming at like trying to grapple how to parent and care for children with needs that were quite different from mine and from my experiences as a neurotypical person, was just how much learning I needed to do about interpreting what was going on for them and understanding what was going on for them, because it wasn't always clear to me. I interpreted things through my experience and my understanding, and then sometimes that didn't seem to match their experience. So there was a huge amount of learning around sensory processing and how they just might literally be experiencing the world in such a different way from how I was experiencing it. And I noticed that it was one of the challenges in getting the support I needed was a lot of the help that was out there was really in the form of sort of diagnostic, looking at what's wrong with the child, looking at what's wrong with your parenting, kind of like this was the lens, what's wrong, what's going wrong, what have you done wrong, what have they done wrong? So it's and a lot of the parents I work with are still going through this, trying to go through the education system and the mental health system and the health system, and experiencing so much judgment and really not receiving a lot of understanding or openness about their experiences and not being believed as a parent. That was an experience I had, and just seeing the pain of that, of really, trying to go to people and say, look, this is what's happening for my child. It's really hard for them, or this is what's happening for me. It's really, I'm struggling, and not being believed, not having their experience validated. It's really painful and really undermining. So yeah, something about, like, I was really touched by this longing to really walk alongside parents and support them and really hear them and understand where they're coming from, really believing their experience, and also do all of this from a very non-judgmental lens, that this is not meaning that you've done something wrong or that your child has done something wrong. These are just incredibly challenging experiences that your child is expressing the best they can, and that you're responding to the best you can. And let's start from there. Can we start from a place of real compassion for what's going on? And I imagine we'll talk a little bit more about nonviolent communication, which is kind of the other modality that I use. But one of the things I really love about nonviolent communication is it has as one of its main sort of foundational principles that all our behavior is trying to meet needs, or our deep values, our deepest longings, our deep human needs that we all have. We all share those needs. So if we can, as parents, have that lens of seeing our children behave in ways that may not make sense to us, like these enormous tantrums, or this, my daughter used to completely strip her room to pieces. She would just knock bookshelves down and pull things down from a very little age. And so if once I sort of got this understanding, like, this may not be a strategy I enjoy. I don't enjoy that she's stripping her whole room to pieces. But as soon as I can understand she's doing it because she's trying to meet a need, in that case, it might have been something around she was trying to find some kind of inner calm, or some kind of peace for herself, or to release some kind of frustration. There was something she was trying to be understood, maybe. And she was 3. She didn't know a good strategy for doing that. At that time, that was the best she could come up with. And so even just understanding it in that way was so powerful and profound for me, really being able to interpret all of her behavior through, and her actions through, that really compassionate lens of, she's trying to meet a need. If I can understand that, then it kind of grounds me, and it gives us a kind of solid place to start the discussion. Yeah. So, and remind me, where what's your question?
I'm not sure where we started from with this, but it was perfect, because I was about to segue into to nonviolent communication anyway. But it is such a helpful foundation to look at behavior as communication, to look at that, creating space around it, in terms of our own visceral reaction to something. And when you have a child who is neurodivergent, or just has any kind of extra needs, or they're just a high intensity child, it's extra. And so there's like that extra level of work to do with the self, in terms of when this person is doing this, or shouting, or throwing the things, or they're aggressive, or they tell me they hate me, or like, what am I feeling? Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
And what strategies do I have to kind of ride that storm and not take it personally, which is sounds so simple, right? But yeah,
and the not take it personally piece, it's something about, as soon as we can see that our children's behavior is not really about us at all. It's not, we interpret it as, they're trying to wind me up, they're I'm a bad mother, like these judgments towards them, or these judgments towards ourselves. But as soon as we can see, no, everything they do is coming from some feeling, some emotion, and connects to some need they're trying to meet, something that's really important to them, something that matters. So it's really about them. It really is. Their behavior is trying to express something in them. And that makes our job a whole lot easier, because rather than thinking, through all these thoughts that we might have, all of these judgments, we can just kind of simplify and try to think, okay, what is it? What is the need here? What is my child crying out for? What is it that they're really longing for? And I really believe that our human needs are the same for all humans. But what might be a little bit different in our neurodiverse children is that sometimes the strategies they might use to meet their needs might be quite different from ours. So this is true for children in general, actually. I think children can use quite unusual strategies at times to try. I often tell the story about my little one would often pour paint on the ground, and we lived with my parents for a while. They had white carpet, and he would just pour paint all over the ground. And it took me a long time to understand that this was actually him really crying out for attention and care because he was, all sorts of things were going on. He was really wanting some attention and care. So this isn't immediately obvious. When you see a child putting paint on the carpet, you don't immediately go, oh yeah, of course, the need there is for connection. But if you sit with it for a while and you really connect with your child, you can start to see this as communication. There's something they're longing for. There's something they're asking for. And how can we, as parents, try to understand what that is? And the same is true for us. Sometimes we can do extraordinary things, and it can take us a while to look at, well, what is the need there when I'm doing this, when I'm scrolling on my phone late into the night, or when I'm having too many glasses of wine, or when I'm zoning out and tuning out all the time and really struggling to stay present. What are the needs there? Is it that I'm actually needing more rest? Is it that I'm needing some self-care? What is it that I'm longing for that's driving this behavior? Yeah.
Yeah, that compassion piece is so big, because there is always something underneath. Yeah. There's always a reason, and sometimes it gets a bit obscured, and just kind of changing tack a little bit, because although the behavior of a child can be big and intense and sometimes infuriating, at times it's also easier to have compassion because they're a child, and then extending, once we're learning about there's a reason behind it, and we're seeing the way that our children bring up our kind of old childhood reactions, then that's that lens of, like, what is my inner child asking for? Mm-hmm. And if my partner's infuriating me, like, their behavior is coming from some need as well. And, and all of those things are just crying out for compassion. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you came across nonviolent communication, and how you've integrated that into your practice, because it's incredibly helpful for the whole family. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So nonviolent communication, I first came across it. It was one of these, these words that you hear a number of times, and I hadn't, I sort of knew of nonviolent communication, or NVC as it's sometimes called. Mm. And I was looking for, in the homeschool groups I was part of, some ways to help to really bring the kids in when there was conflict, and figure out like how can we support kids to work through conflict, rather than it just being adults coming and telling them off and taking them away and separating, telling them off and taking them away. How can we actually support them to learn some skills? And somebody suggested I have a look at nonviolent communication, and I started watching Marshall Rosenberg. If anyone is interested, there's a lot of videos from Marshall Rosenberg, who is the founder of NVC, on YouTube. You can get a whole lot of free resources, and he's got a good book as well. So I just really fell in love with it. Not because I think what's really powerful about NVC isn't that it's necessarily saying anything radically new. Like he was really integrating a lot of ancient wisdom and understanding, but into quite a simple way of understanding it, into a very simple model that you can share pretty easily, and can remember it. It's simple enough. Which I like. I like that in a model. So I've been really delving into NVC quite deeply for the best part of the last decade, really finding more and more depth to how you can use this. I think I started off initially just a friend and I learned together, and we would sort of sit at the side of, the play groups and so on, and give each other little empathy shots where we would just say for 2 minutes what it was that was going on for us, and the other one would just share back, this is what I hear you feeling, and this is what I'm guessing you're needing right now. So just what are your feelings? What are your needs? And it was just like, oh, this is amazing. This is just like, this is instant therapy. It was just, this really incredible experience of actually having someone listen to you, but say back what you might be needing, say back what you're feeling. And I later I've really done a lot of research looking at why does this work? Like as a psychologist, I was really interested, why is this working? And it really does map on to the way our nervous systems work, that when we're heard with resonance, when we hear our emotional experience reflected back to us, it completes an emotional circuit. So it can pass the emotion that might be stuck in our amygdala and limbic system, and it can bring it back up into our cortical centers, and it can sort of release it from your body where you're holding it, bring it right through, completing the circuit, which can really shift something. And then when that emotion or that feeling is tagged to the need, it can kind of open something up in another way. It can allow you to really connect to this sort of this flow of what really matters to you, this motivational force we have of, yeah, what I really need is some support. And that isn't what we immediately do when we're talking and complaining. We might just be, saying how terrible our partner is, or how awful our job is, or whatever it might be. But to connect it to actually, what is the deep longing that I have? What is it that matters so deeply to me? To hear that reflected back, or to name it yourself, it somehow it shifts something in you. It shifts something. It opens up a new realm of creativity. I think it can. It somehow settles something and allows movement to happen in life. It's this really life-giving language and way of being. So I'm just passionate about it, and I've since learned NVC mediation. So I'm trained as a mediator now, and I've used, and NVC is used in all sorts of fields, in diplomacy and in conflict resolution and hostage situations. It's like quite a powerful, simple, powerful kind of method. And I'm so passionate about teaching it to parents, because I think that's where I see this incredible power of this way of speaking to and understanding our children, that removes all the judgment and the criticism and the blame, and just gets straight to the heart of, this is what's actually happening. What's actually happening is you're feeling this and you're needing this, and what's actually happening for me is I'm feeling this and I'm needing this. So just stripping it away, all of the noise, and coming back to that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that explanation. And because, from my experience of NVC, which is much less than yours, what I love about it is the way it creates clarity. And as you were referring to, that clarity of whether you've been heard, so reflecting back to the other person, because it's sometimes very hard to tell whether someone's understood you. And often perhaps they haven't. But if you create this methodology for clarifying, and also that, the self-responsibility is really big in terms of, I'm feeling this, as opposed to, you're making me feel this. And of course, that's really useful as a parent. And naturally, your child is not immediately going to start communicating with you like that if they've been used to other ways. But if you're modeling it over time, right, they're going to pick up on it. Like with anything in parenting, it takes time, and your efforts are worth it. What do you say about that, about this?
I'm interested. So you said a few things in there that I just wanted to pick up on. So I really enjoy that also, the clarity that it gives. A friend and colleague, Danny Cohen, who's a teacher in Israel of nonviolent communication, he puts it like, it's like the static on a radio, and when we start to speak in this way, we're removing a lot of the static and just getting really precise. It's making our message clearer. We're maybe using fewer words to say much more. We're used to saying a lot and actually communicating very little, and this kind of takes all of that away, and actually this is the heart of what I'm trying to say, and having that checking back of, I think I've said this, but is that what you've heard? Maybe it's not. Maybe so getting that feedback of, And I've heard you say all this stuff, but is that what you're really saying? You know, Kirsty, is it that you're feeling sad and you're really wanting some companionship right now? You might say, no, I'm not sad. I'm freaking furious, and you know, I'm actually needing some space. Oh, okay, right, now we understand. Now we can at least have a bit of understanding about where you are. So yeah, I love that, the clarity, and there's a lot of detail around the methodology of NVC that can really support with that clarity, learning how to make really clear requests, learning how to express ourselves in a way that's a lot clearer and closer to what's our inner experience, and learning how to check with other people what it is they're experiencing. So yeah, I think that's really, really amazing. And then there was something else you said. It'll come back to me.
You might have kind of covered it. It was that reflecting back.
Yeah.
Have I understood? And then, you know, using it with your children, for example.
Oh yeah,
you can't expect that immediately your children will be like, when you do this, I feel that.
Yes, so I have no expectation of my children using this whatsoever. So yeah, and I think that's a really important point to clarify. Certainly this is something you can teach to children, and they bring it into schools. There are whole NVC based, you know, what they call giraffe schools, and it can be incredible. Children really do pick it up quite well and quite fast if it's being modeled and used. But for me, the real value, or what I'm excited about in terms of sharing it with parents, is very much an inner processing experience, and some communication, like learning different ways of communicating, I think is incredibly powerful. But even with a non-verbal child, even with a child who's very, very small and maybe can't take the wordiness of it, NVC can be incredibly powerful in terms of our own consciousness and our own understanding and our own inner work. Because largely, I think we tend to think of it as a communication discipline, but I think much more it's a consciousness training. It's us training our consciousness and our awareness rather than being focused on judgments and criticism and blame, which is where we're kind of trained to focus our attention, to bring it instead back onto this real heart connection and self-compassion and compassion for the other, and this and empathy, empathic listening, empathic self-empathy. So that's the power of it for me, the real transformation. I think you can go a long way with making the world a more peaceful place without even necessarily using the language of it, just really through your own inner transformation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I do also love the way it takes out judgment, because we can get so stuck in relationship, any type of relationship, when there's judgments hanging over, and we're not getting to the heart of the issue. And as you're saying, you know, if you go away and watch some videos on nonviolent communication and you haven't encountered it before, you might think, oh, that sounds so unnatural. That's not the way I would talk. But that doesn't necessarily matter. As you're saying, it's more about the process and the essence of the approach, and the energy you bring to it. Because when you're with your children, they can, as you know, they can feel your intentions. So if you're saying the right things and it's a direct contradiction to what you're feeling or what you really believe, you know, they're going to pick up on that.
Absolutely. And so this is really about quite deep authenticity as well. I love that you name it. It's not about learning a perfect way to speak to another person or memorizing little scripts, or, I mean, they can be helpful sometimes. It can be helpful when you're first learning a new way of being to have some, you know, this phrase might be helpful. But for me, it's not really, that's not the most powerful, but it's much more about your own inner process and having a place to direct your attention. And this is another bit that I have since in my sort of backwards research of going, hey, why does this work? One of the things that we know is that our left and right hemispheres process information quite differently, and they process the world around us very differently. And it seems that a lot of the time in our modern world, we're quite left hemisphere dominant, which is getting into a lot of judgment and criticism and analytical kind of thinking. This is spreadsheet thinking. And when we try to be with people and we're left hemisphere dominant, it's quite a jarring experience, because the left hemisphere can't really understand humans as humans, and certainly not children as children. Whereas right hemisphere is very good at being in nature and in our bodies and with other human beings as human beings. We can see people, we can experience that deep connection and presence. That's where it comes from: empathy, compassion, all of this stuff. And what this way of focusing our attention through nonviolent communication, or other methods, there are heaps of ways you can do it, but this is one way. What it's really doing is it's activating your right hemisphere. So it's kind of bringing yourself back online. Your full, and I think any parent knows this experience of, you might be with your child and just have this resistance, just like, oh, just this, they've just done this, they're having a tantrum, this is crap, I hate this, and you just, you've got this real, and then something softens. And you experience this softness of compassion, and this is your right hemisphere coming back online. So I actually see this as a way of really connecting this inner softness, this inner compassion, this inner kind of waking up of our right hemisphere circuitry that can help us to parent in that way. Really heart-centered, connection-based attachment parenting, what you're talking, not attachment parenting in this kind of prescriptive way, but genuine attachment. Like, the basis of our relationship is this love, care, attachment. So that's why I love it.
Yes, yeah. So it's kind of like a useful structure or scaffold for dropping into that authentic presence,
Yeah.
And beingness, which is kind of at the heart of it all, really, isn't it? And you're right, sort of the modern lifestyle and society can take us out of that, and the judgments and the plunket and the and sometimes we just need that support to come back into this kind of intuitive sense of how to be in relationship. So
how to be
funny.
in relationship. Yeah. How to be in relationship with our children. Even when it's really hard, even when we're overwhelmed and the laundry's not done, and they don't want to go to school, or they're pouring paint on the carpet, how can we still find that really deep connection with them that they need? And it's really not just about, for me, making their life better. It does make their life better, but it's also about making our lives easier, because it's so hard to parent in that way of this kind of I don't know, I call it the mainstream approach, but it's this way of parenting where we're focused on the sticker charts and the behavior, ticking the boxes. Have you done this? Have you taken them to this activity? This kind of tightly controlled way of trying to manage behavior. And when we're focused on that, it is so hard for us. It is not a joyful way to live. So the more we can just parent from this place of deep, deep connection, the easier and richer our lives become. So that's what I want for every parent. I want them to be able to find this place of deep connection with themselves, this loving acceptance, and loving acceptance for their child. And that's where that connection comes from, I think.
Yeah, amazing. So we'll wrap up soon, but do you want to share anything about what you've got coming up? I already mentioned that I saw some events about grief, because I got excited about that.
I'm excited about that too. That's something, so we're going to be offering that as a regular offering starting this month, but as a monthly offering, because we want lots of opportunities. And what that's really going to be about is just coming together in an online, we've done them in person as well, but we want to offer it online, a space where we can just come and in small caring groups listen to each other, a little bit like the empathy shot that I was talking about at the beginning, but just a chance to listen to each other and have a space for our grief, our sadness, our guilt that comes up as parents, and not have any advice thrown at you, not be reassured or told to be grateful, but just actually to be heard. So a real space of being heard. So that's one thing we're going to be offering. we also, so through Peace Talks, what we offer is one-on-one support. I do like one-on-one sessions with people, kind of coaching, mentoring, kind of support. And we also offer online training, which is really about nonviolent communication, but more broadly, how to connect deeply with our children and how to move from being really quite overwhelmed and in a place of chaos in your family, how to move through to having this kind of deep, loving connection in a more peaceful home. And we have a course that's starting shortly, which is going to be an 8-month program, quite gentle, small bites across 8 months, because it takes time to transition. So that's, you know, so we really want to give people support for long enough. And it's going to be a mix of online teaching and also some live Zoom sessions, so a chance to meet with Yorinda or I and ask your questions and do some practice together and that sort of thing. So that's really exciting as well. That's coming up quite soon. And the other thing I'm really passionate about is sharing this stuff on YouTube at the moment. This is fairly new for me, but I just really, it's so in my heart to want as many people as possible to be able to get this freely. This, you know, I want this kind of understanding to be available. I could have used it so when I was in that place. So I'd really, you know, I want it to be as freely available as possible. And all of our work, by the way, is offered on a gift economy, because we really want to, we know that a lot of parents are struggling financially, that this isn't easy to find that kind of support. So we operate a gift economy where we invite people to contribute what they're able and willing to contribute for all of our offerings. So, you know, as long as possible, we're gonna do it that way. Yeah, so those are the main things coming up.
Yeah, amazing. And it is such the gift, isn't it, to, you know, have experiences that may be challenging and then think, how can I use these experiences to pay it forward? What would have assisted me? That's the gift I can bring forward to others. And so, yeah, I will share your links in the description and really encourage people to check out the YouTube channel. It's really great. I've been dipping into it and I'm like, yes, this is so good. Yeah, so good. And so,
yeah, and Kirsty, I love the same for you. I love to see how you're sharing from those challenging experiences and how you're now contributing and offering this back. It's just, it's so inspiring to see. I love it.
Yeah, so much gratitude to you. And you know, just a little bit of a light, I guess, for people who are really in the thick of it. Maybe you've got toddlers, maybe you've got very young children who are on the spectrum, and it can be so intense. And it may continue to be intense, but I can say, you know, that from my experience and, you know, from what we've talked about from yours, because you've got teenagers, my children are 9 and 12, so we're kind of heading in that direction. And, you know, all of this work and this communication and the presence, it does pay off. I'm just, when I reflect back, I'm in awe of how much easier things are now, how joyful my relationships are with my children, how fun, you know, like they're getting to the age where I can joke around with them and I'm like, wow, this is so fun. Yeah. And
yeah, I just to second that. Like there really is hope. It can be easier. Like it may, I don't think it's ever going to be super easy being a parent these days. I don't, you know, I don't want to give people the idea that, oh, if you do this, you're going to suddenly, it's going to be, you know, it's not like that. It's always going to be challenging. Yeah, but I so agree with what you're saying, Kirsty, that the putting the focus on building that deep connection pays off in dividends. Like I don't like the financial term, but it is an investment. There's something so powerful about putting that support in early. It's like, you know, putting the scaffolding on a little sapling and the trunk just keeps growing. You don't see it happening, but the strength that can come and the bond.
Yeah, that's right. Like you're probably not going to see it tomorrow if you start today. And that's the thing. And that's why it's so important, you know, to have support from people like you. So yeah, thank you for the work you're spreading in the world. Very beautiful and much
Thank you so
appreciated.
much for having me on, Kirsty. It's been so lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you from us here at the Ananda Rose channel, and we'll see you all next time. So bye for now.
Bye. For you.